There is something more painful than suffering itself. The silence of God in the middle of it. Why do good people receive some of life's hardest blows, while heaven seems completely closed? Today we enter the disturbing story of Job, and confront the answer almost nobody wants to hear. Because Job did everything people say you were supposed to do. He lived honestly, he cared for his family, he feared God, and still, his entire life was destroyed. But the most disturbing part is not only what happened to him, it is that Job never learned the real reason why. The story begins in a place called Uz. There lived a man named Job. He was wealthy. He had land, livestock, servants, sons, and daughters. But the Bible does not introduce Job merely as a successful man. It describes him as blameless and upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. Job was not perfect, but he was not secretly evil. He was not a criminal. He was not a corrupt man finally receiving what he deserved. That detail is essential, because what happens next destroys one of the most comforting beliefs human beings have ever created. If you are good, good things will happen to you. If you are bad, you will suffer. Job's story tells us that life does not always follow that rule. Sometimes good people suffer terribly, and sometimes people who cause suffering continue living in comfort. Then the story moves to a place Job cannot see, a heavenly court. A figure appears whom the text calls the Accuser. He challenges Job's faith. Does Job truly love God, or does Job love only the protection God gives him? The Accuser's argument is brutal. Of course Job believes. Look at his life. He has wealth. He has children. He has safety. Take those things away, and his faith will disappear with them. This is no longer just a religious debate. It becomes a fight between what we believe we deserve and the cruel reality of life. We want to believe goodness creates protection, that faith creates safety, that doing the right thing places an invisible wall around us. But Job's story asks a terrifying question. What happens to faith when that wall collapses? Job never hears the conversation. He does not know that his life has become part of something happening beyond his sight. He sees only what happens on earth, and in a single day, everything begins to fall apart. A messenger arrives. Job's animals have been stolen. His servants have been killed. Before the man finishes speaking, another messenger appears. Fire has fallen, more animals are dead, more servants are gone. Before that messenger finishes, another one comes. A second attack, more destruction, more death. Then the final messenger arrives. Job's sons and daughters had been eating together inside a house. A powerful wind struck the building. The walls collapsed. The roof fell. Every one of his children died. In a matter of minutes, Job loses his wealth, his workers, his security, and all of his children. He tears his robe. He shaves his head. He falls to the ground. And he says, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away." But the story does not stop there, because the accuser returns. He claims Job can survive losing other people, as long as his own body is protected. So, Job is struck with a painful disease. Sores cover him from head to foot. He sits in ashes. He takes a broken piece of pottery and scrapes his skin. The man who once had everything is now sitting outside society, covered in wounds, mourning his children. His wife looks at him and says, "Curse God and die." Job refuses, but do not mistake his refusal for peace. Job does not smile. He does not pretend the pain is part of some beautiful plan. He does not say everything is fine. In chapter 3, Job curses the day he was born. He asks why he was ever allowed to live. He wishes he had died before seeing the world. This is not polished religion. This is not comfortable faith. This is a broken man speaking without a mask. And yet, he continues speaking to God, even when he no longer understands him. Then 3 friends arrive, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. At first, they do the wisest thing anyone does in the story. They sit beside Job, 7 days, 7 nights, no speeches, no explanations. They simply remain near him, because his suffering is too great for words. But eventually, they begin to speak. And this is where the greatest trap appears. Job is not the only person searching for an explanation. Everyone around him needs one too, because unexplained suffering terrifies us. If something terrible can happen to Job for no clear reason, then it can happen to anyone. So his friends create an explanation that makes the world feel safe again. God is just. Job is suffering. Therefore, Job must have done something wrong. Maybe he committed a hidden sin. Maybe he abused someone. Maybe he is lying. Maybe he only appeared righteous. Their logic is simple. Innocent people do not suffer like this. Therefore, Job cannot be innocent. And their words sound disturbingly familiar. God is punishing you. You did not have enough faith. You attracted this into your life. Everything happens for a reason. Maybe this is what you needed. These phrases still appear whenever someone's life collapses, not because people always understand the suffering, but because they are afraid of a world where suffering cannot be easily explained. If Job caused his own tragedy, then everyone else can feel safe. Just avoid his mistakes, follow the rules, believe correctly, think positively, and nothing terrible will happen to you. But the audience knows something Job's friends do not. God himself described Job as upright. The friends speak confidently about God. They believe they are defending him, but they are wrong. And the more Job protests, the more guilty they believe him to be. They transform a suffering man into an accused man. Job never claims he has never made a mistake, but he knows he has done nothing that explains the destruction of his entire life. So he asks God to answer. Not the friends, not the religious experts, God. He wants to know what charge has been brought against him. He wants to know why his children are dead, why his body is broken, why everything was taken, but God remains silent. Chapter after chapter, Job speaks, his friends answer, Job cries out. The sky does not move, and suddenly this ancient story becomes painfully modern, because many people know this silence. You pray for someone to recover, and they die. You ask for help, and nothing changes. You try to live honestly, and watch dishonest people prosper. You beg God for one sign, one answer, one moment of clarity, but your words seem to hit the ceiling and fall back down. Sometimes the worst part of suffering is not the pain itself. It is the possibility that nobody is listening. Then, in chapter 38, God finally speaks. But he does not answer the way Job expected. God does not explain the scene in heaven. He does not mention the accuser. He does not explain why Job's children died. He does not give Job the hidden information the reader received at the beginning. Instead, God asks, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where were you when life formed from something too small for your eyes to see? When winds moved across the sea? When stars were born in darkness?" God speaks about oceans, storms, constellations, light, darkness, animals that survive without human care, creatures Job cannot control, forces he cannot understand. At first, the answer can sound almost cruel. Job asks why his children died, and God speaks about stars. Job asks why he is suffering, and God speaks about oceans and wild animals. But God is not saying, "Your suffering does not matter." He is confronting the limit of human vision. Job can see his pain, but he cannot see the whole structure of reality. He can see one moment, one body, one grave, one shattered family. But he cannot see every cause, every consequence, every life, every force moving through creation. Job believes there are only two possible answers. Either he is guilty or God is unjust. God shows him that reality may be larger than both explanations. But here is the answer nobody wants to hear. Job is not given a complete explanation. God appears, but he does not explain everything. Job receives a confrontation with the vastness of reality, not a simple reason for his pain. And maybe that is why this story remains so disturbing. We want suffering to contain a message, a lesson, a hidden purpose we can understand. We want every tragedy to become meaningful by the final scene. But the book of Job refuses to promise that. It does not say every tragedy is punishment. It does not say every illness is a test. It does not say every death happens because the victim lacked faith. It does not say pain can always be explained. At the end, God rebukes Job's friends. The men who confidently defended God were the ones who spoke wrongly about him. Job cried, questioned, protested, demanded answers, and God did not condemn him for being honest. That matters. Because faith in the book of Job does not mean pretending pain feels good. It does not mean refusing to question. It does not mean smiling while your world burns. Job's life is eventually restored. He receives wealth again. He has more children. But the ending does not erase what happened. New children do not make dead children meaningless. New joy does not delete old grief. Life can continue, without the wound ever becoming unreal. Maybe the central question of Job is not simply, why do good people suffer? Maybe it is the question asked at the beginning. Does a person love God, or only what God gives them? It is easy to believe when your family is safe, when your body is healthy, when money is available, when your prayers seem to work. But what remains when the blessings disappear? What remains when God gives no explanation? What remains when heaven is silent? Job never received every answer, but he refused to end the conversation. He cried, he became angry, he questioned everything, and still, he remained. Maybe real faith is not certainty. Maybe it is not the absence of doubt. Maybe it is not having an explanation for everything. Maybe faith is refusing to lie about your pain, while still speaking into the silence. Because sometimes, faith does not mean knowing why you suffer. Sometimes it means crying out into the darkness and hoping that the silence is not the end.